that you're here for this evening. We really appreciate you being here. As you know, we are going to talk about understanding award letters because unfortunately, award letters vary across all kinds of things. So there is good award letters and there's not so good award letters. So we want to talk to you a bit about those things and teach you some things about how to look at your award letters a bit more closely and make some determinations for your family and for your students.
Okay, and now we will do introductions. My name is Criselia Calderon Sandoval, and I'm a program officer with the Scholarships and Financial Aid Education Department here with the College Success Foundation. And before this role, I was doing outreach for the College Bound Scholarship. Thank you for being here. And now I'll let Carrie introduce herself.
Hi, my name's Carrie. I'm also within the Scholarship and Financial Aid Education Department here at CSF, and I'm a program officer. I oversee 3 of the scholarships that we run. And then before that, I was a financial aid officer. And Melissa?
Awesome. So I'm Melissa Pico. I am the College Bound Regional Officer for the King County area. So I travel around to different middle schools and high schools talking about the College Bound Scholarship, as well as talking about and helping students and families with FAFSA and WASFA. So financial aid and award letters and all that kind of stuff is right up my alley. So our objectives for today, like I mentioned, we're going to talk about and identify different types of aid and what we would typically call kind of ranking, looking at like what's the best kind of aid and maybe not so good aid. And then we're also going to look at comparing offers to determine the actual affordability. Sometimes the numbers can be a little bit deceiving. So we're going to look at that. And we're also going to talk about how you can accept and decline your aid. You don't have to take all of it. You can kind of pick and choose which is going to be best for you in your situation. So we'll talk a bit about those options. And then we'll also talk about, what you can do if you do have unmet need. And then we'll also touch on special circumstances. If you feel like that you're in a special circumstance or you ended up doing a FAFSA where you selected special circumstances and how you can go about that process a little bit. And then we will end with a Q&A. So I will say that there is 2 things you can use during this webinar. There is a Q&A button and there's a chat button. And we are going to do Q&A at the end, but we would love for you to put your questions into either the Q&A or the chat so that when we do get to the end, you haven't forgotten them, and then we can address them at that point so that we can kind of talk through any questions that came up during the presentation, okay? So definitely feel free to pop your questions into that Q&A or the chat. Okay, so we are gonna first start off by acknowledging that we know this has been a really funky year, and it still is, right? We know that there are some students and families that haven't even been able to complete the FAFSA, and so we know that we know it's been a struggle, and we also want to continue to provide you all with information. As your award letters start to come in, we want you to have this knowledge to be able to look at your award letters in a way that is going to be most helpful for you. And in that vein, this is being recorded because we end up putting it onto our financial aid hub. So the recording and the slides are going to be up there, and we'll touch a little bit more on the financial aid, the CSF financial aid hub later on in the presentation as well. Okay, so let's talk about some key terms. Something you're going to hear a lot tonight and what you will hopefully be seeing on your award letters is cost of attendance, or COA. Our cost of attendance is really all-encompassing. So when you look at tuition and fees, that is just one part of the cost of attendance, right? You also have your housing, your food, books and supplies, transportation, and other, personal miscellaneous expenses that you need for college, whether it be clothes or hygiene items, things like that. So when we talk about cost of attendance, we're including all the things that actually cost to go to college. And then that cost of attendance is then affected by many things. And the biggest four on here are the type of institution. And so if you're going to a 2-year college, it's going to be different than 4-year. If you're going to a 4-year public, it's going to be different than a 4-year private college. So thinking about, what kind of college that you're going to, and is that affecting the affordability or the cost of attendance in a negative or positive way? Whether or not you're on campus or off campus, so where you're living, your housing situation, that can either decrease or increase the cost of attendance. And then if you're going to college in Washington State or out of state, when you often go out of state, you have a higher cost of attendance, right, for being a non-resident in that state. And then, of course, the number of credits. Most colleges will, charge by the credit. And so if you're overloading credits or even taking a typical load, it's going to be more expensive than, if you're going half-time or things like that. So those are kind of the main things that are going to have the biggest effects, rather, on your cost of attendance. And then when we were looking at cost of attendance is all encompassing. So it includes both direct and our indirect costs. The direct costs are things that are being paid directly to the school. So like your tuition and fees. And if you're living on campus, your room and board also goes directly to the college, right? But then you have all these indirect costs. So, if you're not living on campus, you have housing. If you have transportation, your books and supplies, insurance, all those sorts of things, those are all the indirect costs. They're not being paid to the college, to the financial institution, but but you're still needing to have those are still the cost to actually go to college. So when we're talking about cost of attendance, we're including both direct and indirect together to get that total cost of attendance.
Okay, now let's review different ways that you can pay for all the costs that Melissa mentioned. So what are the types of financial aid available for students to pay for their college expenses? When students are looking at their college's financial aid award offer, they may see that they have been offered a lot of different types of aid. It's important when you look at a financial aid package, that is the award letter, that you're able to distinguish between the types of aid that you have been offered, because not all financial aid packages are created the same, and it's important to know the differences between the types of aid listed on your award letter to understand which one is best for you. So let's review the three main types. One type of aid is free money. This includes grants and scholarships. This is the best aid available. Grants and scholarships are financial aid that you do not have to pay back. You do not incur any debt or pay out of pocket. And the second type of aid is loans. So they're also known as student loans, and it is money that students borrow to pay for school. Loans are an investment in your future. If you do need to borrow money, remember to only take out what you need, because there is a cost to borrowing money from institutions. These loans must be paid back with interest. When making a decision on what school to attend, it's important that you know your borrowing limits and how much debt you're comfortable with. And then a third type of financial aid is earned money, also known as work study. So this is usually an on-campus job that allows students to earn money while they're in school. And we will discuss these three options later in the presentation and other questions to consider if you're offered these types of aid. Okay, colleges use financial need to determine if a student is eligible for certain types of aid, like grants, certain student loans, and scholarships. Financial need is determined by subtracting the total amount of free money from the cost of attendance, and unmet need can be filled with different types of funding to ensure the cost of attendance is fully covered. Work study, loans, private scholarships, family support, and savings are types of funding that can be used to pay for the gap or unmet need that students may have. Okay, so now we'll cover the basics of becoming an informed consumer. It's important to be well informed. Students should know that they don't have to accept everything that is being offered on their award letter. They have the option to reduce certain amounts and even decline whole awards if it's burdensome to their current situation. You can also adjust your living situation. So if you're able to live at home or rent an apartment, this is often less expensive than living in the dorms. Or if you're able to use public transportation, that's also less expensive than having a vehicle, but it all depends on your specific situation. Sometimes we do need a car to be able to get to work. Okay, and the other reason is financial planning. So use this opportunity to develop your consumer knowledge, that is engage in financial planning. Students need to consider how much debt you're willing to have and what are the starting and average salaries in your career field and how debt may affect your future plans and other life goals. Students should consider the following questions. How much will you have to borrow for your whole education? How much can you expect to make with entry-level salaries? How much will your monthly loan payment be? Will you be earning enough to make this payments? If not, how much interest, sorry, if not, how much interest will be accruing on your loans? What is the amount, what is that amount after 25 years? Okay. And this process can also be used as a bargaining tool. It's important to support students at the beginning of this process by encouraging them to apply to several schools and a range of institutions. Without these steps, students cannot compare award offers and or use them as a bargaining tool. Students shouldn't be afraid to ask one school for more money, sharing with school A that school B has offered more and better aid, that is more gift aid. This is a good strategy to request additional funds. And during this process, students might be surprised when they compare numbers. Until all of the numbers are considered, not just tuition, it is difficult to know which school will be the most affordable. You may just be surprised. For example, many private schools tend to offer private scholarships, which can reduce the student's unmet need. And it is important to consider all of the information available when making such a big decision. Shopping for an education is not different from making other big purchases in life. In the same way that you would discourage, so you want to also think about, you wouldn't want to get a payday loan. And so you don't want to sign up for an education that will leave you with unmanageable debt. And now Carrie will go over what is a good award letter.
Thank you. All right, so we're going to go over the qualities of a good award letter. And when we say a good award letter, what we're referring to is an award letter that's transparent and informative, and it provides you with the necessary information to make an informed decision when you're considering an offer, meaning you've applied for multiple schools and you want to compare and contrast what school is the best for you. So a good award letter will answer these areas. That's cost of attendance, free money, and then your out-of-pocket expenses. So first, we're going to look at cost of attendance. And when we're looking at a financial aid award letter, how much a school may offer is important, but it's also important to put into context the annual cost of going to that school. So a good award letter shows the cost of attendance, and it includes your direct costs, which is what you pay to the school, and then the indirect costs, which is what you don't pay to the school. It's your living expenses, right? So class supplies, books, transportation, and all those other expenses that go along with going to college. So the good award letter would have the free money listed. Hopefully you qualify for it. So that's the grants and scholarships. And then the more that you receive, the less you'll have to take out in loans or pay for out of pocket. So again, like Cresselia and Melissa mentioned, that's the best amount, that's the best aid possible. And then after the grants and scholarships, a good award letter will show you how much you have to pay out of pocket. that basically that gap that needs to be filled. And so some students choose to borrow student loans. Some students also are offered something called work study, where you work on campus, and it's a type of grant that you're offered, but you work to receive that money. So we'll go into work study later, but being awarded work study is also amazing. And then a good award letter would also touch base on unmet need. So that's what's left to be paid off after all of your financial aid is awarded. And if you have remaining unmet need, does the award letter provide options on how to fill the gap? So again, loans or paying for out of pocket, or working part-time or full-time while you're going to school. So it's important to know what you have to do next, and it should provide answers on who you can call with questions and how to appeal for more financial aid. And it may also tell you what forms need to be submitted and the deadlines for forms. And also, the award letter should outline that this is for one academic year, and then you do have to keep applying for financial aid each and every year. Next, we'll look into a great award letter. And a great award letter would cover everything that I just talked about, but it would offer work study. And if it's a fantastic award letter, it'll show you how much your pay rate is. It'll tell you how many hours of work, how many hours a week that you would work in order to get your full grant that you were awarded. And then it would also touch base on your scholarships, and it'll tell you, is it offered for 1 year? Does it need to be renewed? And if it does need to be renewed, it has those clear next steps on how to renew your scholarship. And I want to preface this by saying this is not typical of an award letter to have all of this information on there. So if your award letter doesn't have that, it doesn't mean it's a bad award letter. This is just like the top 5% that might have this. And then as the next part would be loans. So a good award letter would outline the terms and conditions of loans, and then what the monthly payments of the loans would be, when interest starts accruing, and when you have to start repaying your loans, when that begins. And I want to make it clear that if you are offered loans from a school, you don't have to accept them. You can accept just a portion of them, or you can decline them altogether. You don't have to take student loans. And there is something called a Parent Plus loan. So that is basically using your parents' credit to get additional funding. But a Parent Plus loan has a higher interest rate, and your parent can be denied for the Parent Plus loan if they don't have great credit. We don't recommend getting a Parent Plus loan, but we know that that's the only option for some people. So we want to put it out there to let you know that it is an option. So on the next slide, we're going to go over an award letter, what it would look like. And this is from a previous academic year. So at the top, you're going to see something highlighted called an EFC. This upcoming year, it's going to change, and it's going to be called an SAI, or Student Aid Index. So the lower that number, that EFC, the better. So you'll see that this EFC is 0. That means that the student would qualify for the most financial aid possible, the grants and scholarships. And then, excuse me, I do want to note that this award letter is based off of 12 credits per term. So anytime you look at an award letter, it's going to be based on full-time enrollment. So if you're going to take less than 12 credits towards your degree, your award for that term does get prorated, and your financial aid office will let you know that. The third item that's highlighted, it's under grants and scholarships, and it clearly informs you that you don't need to pay those funds. The only time that you would pay grants and scholarships back is if you drop credits. So for example, you're taking 15 credits and you're like, this is a little bit too much for me. I took on more than I could chew. I need to drop 5 credits. And you do it the second week of the quarter. you want to talk to your financial aid office before you drop anything, because you would probably owe money back to the school because they awarded you at full time. Now you're going to be at 3/4 time. So you'll get a bill saying you owe us a couple $100s. So always talk to financial aid before you decide to drop a class. And then the last thing that's highlighted is the loan section. And as you can see, it states that those loans do need to be repaid. Alrighty, so as we continue to see how this institution provides all the necessary information to educate students, make financially sustainable decisions, and prompt them to take next steps. So for the next steps, the students borrowing loans, they'll need to sign what's called a promissory note. So at any institution that you go to, if you decide to take out loans, you have to go through the federal government and sign a promissory note. And on this award letter, they show you the link on how to do that. So that's fantastic. And then on this award letter, it also mentions that you don't have to accept all of the loans that are offered to you. And a lot of people don't know that. So kudos to them. And then next you can see that this student qualifies for work study, and it spells out the hourly rate, the number of weeks in a semester, and the frequency of payments. So with this information, the student can calculate how much they need to work to earn the whole award that's listed on their offer. And it also provides information on the next steps. And we can also see the total amount of aid offered and how it's going to be dispersed. So in this case, the student has a debit card called Hire One card, and a lot of colleges do have that here in Washington State. And then we can also see that the 9-month estimated budget for those living on campus and off campus. As we mentioned, living on campus is more expensive than off campus, and it's broken down into tuition and fees, room and board. And we want to keep in mind that these totals are missing other costs like books, transportation, class supplies, and personal expenses. But overall, we think that this is a really good example of an award letter that's very transparent. So on the next slide, we just want to give you a heads up that not all award letters are created like this one. So when you're looking at your award letter, if there's any information missing or it's unclear, please contact your financial aid office. They will help you out as much as possible. And this will ensure that you're well informed to make the best decision possible. And you'll always want to contact them first if you have any questions.
Okay, in contrast, here we have an example of a bad financial aid letter. Unfortunately, we see this type of letters too often. So this award letter includes very little information for students to make an informed decision. There's no cost of attendance, no student aid index, and no instructions on how to accept loans. It's important to make informed decisions, so definitely ask questions. You can go to your school's website and get this information, or you can call the financial aid office so that you can make the best decision that will work for you. And now we're going to go over questions that you can ask when reviewing your award package. So when assessing the school cost, it's important to ask the following questions. Does this award letter include the school's cost of attendance? Remember, make sure that the cost of attendance includes both direct and indirect cost. If it doesn't, make sure that you research the cost of attendance because you will want to know what you're paying for. And when students receive any financial aid, make sure that you understand the requirements for maintaining that aid. Remember, it is possible to lose your eligibility for financial aid, so it's important to understand the requirements for maintaining each award. If you receive a scholarship, it's important to ask if it's renewable. If it is only for 1 year, then you have to think about how you're going to pay for those expenses the next year. And if it is renewable, do you know how to renew that scholarship? And is there a deadline to renew? It's important to ask if you can switch majors and keep the scholarship. So make sure that you understand all of these requirements. And now let's discuss student aid index, which replaced expected family contribution. It's important to ask, does the award letter include the student's aid index? The SAI is calculated using the information entered on the FAFSA or WASFA. And colleges do not cover the student aid index with need-based aid. The only aid that can be used to cover the SAI is non-need-based aid, like an unsubsidized or Parent Plus loan. In some instances, merit-based aid can be used, but it depends on the scholarship provider and the financial aid office. So it's important to know your SAI because you will need to plan on how to come up with the funds to cover your SAI. It's important to see if you have any unmet need that is not covered by financial aid. So if this is the case, how are you or your family planning on covering that gap? And then later we will review different options if unmet need is too high. Okay, when reviewing loan offers from colleges, students have many things to consider before borrowing. First, they should know which loans are being offered by the school. Subsidized loans have an interest subsidy while the student is in school, which means there is no interest accruing, while unsubsidized loans do accrue interest while you're in college. Secondly, is knowing how much a student is willing to borrow. Some students only want to borrow what is needed to cover their direct costs, while others may want to borrow enough to cover both direct and indirect cost. And like any loan, whether it's a student loan or a car loan, knowing the interest rate and terms and conditions is essential before borrowing. Going in blindly can be detrimental for students as you go into repayment. And finally, students have to think long-term. What will their loan debt be years into the future? Do you need to consider more debt for graduate school? Will your earnings after graduation be enough to pay for your loans? It's also important to consider adjustments to aid. Some financial aid offices may have a practice that limits institutional aid when a student receives additional funding. For instance, a student may be awarded an institutional grant and later receive a scholarship after the initial award letter. Colleges will then take away the institutional funds and replace it with a scholarship. This is known as aid displacement. Students should be questioning this practice with their financial aid offices. And finally, although award letters are for the upcoming academic year, it's important to look to the future years as well. Will this year's financial aid package cover the same expenses next year? Do awards change as costs go up? How much, if any, does tuition increase each year? And now we're going to examine 4 different award offers. But before we do that, here is the formula we will be using on the next slides. First, we want to gather all the components that are included in the cost of attendance to get your cost of attendance number. Then we will gather information for all of the free money gift aid that you have received. And then for the third step, we will deduct the free money from the cost of attendance, and this will give you the balance of what needs to be paid or the gap. And then for the fourth step, you can use this information to obtain your out-of-pocket cost for 4 years. So you would add your student aid index, your loans, work study, gap, and multiply that by 4 to get the total out-of-pocket cost for 4 years. And this calculation does not include interest rates. And now let's compare examples of potential offers that students can receive. So on this slide, you can view an example of the cost of attendance at 4 schools. Which school seems most affordable? As you can see, Bellevue College is the most affordable option when compared to the other 3 schools. Okay, so based on the previous slide detailing the cost, I also have the cost of attendance here. Take a look at these aid packages and see which aid package is the best. You can see that if the student attends Bellevue College, the student's total cost of attendance is covered with the financial aid they received. The student has a gap of about $1,000 at the University of Washington, and at Eastern, it's about $2,000, and at Whitworth, it's about $18,000. And now let's review the student's work-study options. Wait, let me go back. Here. Okay. In this example, the student is offered work-study at all three schools, with the exception of Bellevue. University of Washington and Eastern offered $1,000 each, and Whitworth offered $3,000. So it's important for students to know that if they wish to take advantage of a work-study position, they are responsible for finding a work-study job. So meaning they will be responsible for applying and interviewing for a position. They need to know where the jobs are posted and how to apply. A work-study amount is not automatically given. It must be worked for like a regular job. So you earn as you work. If students are considering taking a work-study position, make sure that that they understand how to proceed with securing the work-study award. And it's also important to consider that if you are taking a work-study position, to forecast how many hours you will have to work a week to earn that work-study award. Keep in mind that you will be balancing your time, getting used to a new college environment, studying, and any other aspects of college life. And now Carrie will continue with this comparison.
Thank you, Crisselia. So for loans that are offered, we're also looking at the difference between subsidized and unsubsidized loan. A subsidized loan is interest-free. So no interest is accruing while you're in school. And then with an unsubsidized loan, there is interest accruing while you're in school. So when we're comparing schools, we see that Eastern and Whitworth, a student got a subsidized loan, right? And then the student at Whitworth got an unsubsidized loan of $2,000. So that $2,000 has interest accruing while they're in school. And then once they're done overall, you can see for Eastern, they still just pay the $1,416 back, but with the Whitworth student, because they took out an unsub loan, they're paying back about $8,500 when they only borrowed about $5,500. Alrighty, so we're going to look at the next slide where it compares the cost of attendance. So in this slide, we're looking at your cost of attendance, which is the annual cost to go to school compared to the amount of financial aid awarded. So you can see that Bellevue College is the most affordable and Whitworth is the most expensive. And this is looking at a 4-year period, not a 1-year period. I want to keep that in mind as well. But with Whitworth, that could be like a 1-year annual amount. So it's important to look at how much your college costs when you're deciding to go there. So to keep this exercise uniform, the student's EFC or student aid index is 0, so they qualify for the most grant aid possible. And when we're comparing what the grant aid is by school, you'll notice that a school who has a lower cost of attendance, like Bellevue, they also have a lesser amount of grant aid awarded. And the reason for that is because their cost of attendance is lower. So it costs less to go to that school, which means your cost of attendance is lower. You're still receiving the max amount of grant aid possible, and it'll cover, hopefully, the cost of your tuition and fees. But Whitworth does have more grant aid available. And as we continue to look through the aid awarded, you'll see that the student attending Whitworth, at the bottom, they ended up taking about $34,000 in student loans to help cover the cost of their schooling, because even though they were awarded so much grant aid, it still didn't cover everything. So overall, Whitworth does offer the most financial aid possible, but ultimately the student ends up walking away with more debt. because the school costs so much. And I would attribute that to somebody living on campus versus off campus, because when you're living on campus, the cost of room and board is the same, if not more, as your tuition and fees. So you have to come up with some way to pay for it. And in the next slide, we'll look at the same schools and we'll compare the direct costs versus the aid that was awarded and see if the amount of financial aid that the student received actually covers their schooling cost. So in the first line, you can see the drastic difference between the annual cost of Bellevue College versus Whitworth. And then in the second line, you'll notice that the gift aid at Whitworth is double the amount offered at Bellevue College. And that's because, again, Bellevue does not cost as much annually as Whitworth. And then in line 3, it'll show us that after paying off tuition and fees, about 3 out of 4 schools will give you back a refund. So that refund will help cover books, transportation, whatever you want to use it for. That's school related. And then the student that's at Whitworth, they are in red, right? That 15,000 that you're seeing, because there is no refund that goes to the students. So they have to figure out a way to pay that 15,000. And a lot of people turn to loans in that case. So the other students that are attending UW, Eastern, and Whitworth, they seem to also have quite a bit of expenses outside of school. Again, most likely because they're living on campus or close to campus. So students turn to loans. And we recommend, if possible, maybe taking your prereqs at a community college before transferring to a 4-year institution so that you don't end up in a ton of debt. So on the next slide, we're going to go over a loan calculator. So when considering taking out loans, it's important to understand that how much you're borrowing will impact your future after you graduate. It's important to forecast how much interest will be accrued and what monthly payments might look like when you have to start paying them, and what the recommended minimum salary is for you to live comfortably and repay your loans. So in this example, we use the national average amount of student loan debt. And when you're considering taking out loans, also think about what you're going to be getting paid, your entry-level wages when you start working. And we want you to borrow only what you need and what you'll be able to pay back. So something that's really important to remember is student loan debt can't be discharged through bankruptcy. So there are people who take out a ton of loans and then they don't pay them back, and it impacts their credit. And then when they try to rent an apartment, they can't rent an apartment, they can't buy a house. Their wages are garnished, their tax refund is garnished. And with things like credit cards and mortgages and business loans, if you can't pay those back, you can always file for bankruptcy, and then that debt goes away. It impacts your credit, but the debt goes away. With student loans, it doesn't go away. So please be mindful of how much you take out. All right. So next slide, please. We're going to go over some other ways to help pay for school other than loans. So after reviewing your financial aid package from your school that you apply to, some schools will be less affordable than others, which we covered. And what you'll do in that case, if you can't afford the cost of that school, you can always look for more aid. So one way is by appealing the financial aid package that your school gave you, and you can ask to see if there's any additional types of aid available. Or if you're experiencing any special circumstances, you can consider doing a special circumstance or professional judgment appeal with your financial aid office. And then you can consider contacting the financial aid offices and offering competitive appeal by using one financial aid award letter versus another financial aid award letter, and see if that school can match or give you more financial aid than the other school. It's not common that they'll do that, but you can try it. And then, of course, you can apply for scholarships. So I'm going to drop some websites in the chat for you guys to look at. to see if you qualify for any scholarships this upcoming academic year. And we're going to keep preaching it. If you can, live off campus versus on campus. If you can get a roommate, if you can, parents, if that's possible. Consider commuting on public transportation rather than driving, because the parking sometimes is very expensive on campus. And then, of course, the cost of gas that keeps rising. And if you can, work part-time to help offset the cost of tuition. And there's something called a CLEP test that a lot of people don't know about, where if you really excel in a particular subject, you can test out of it. So let's say you're really great at Spanish and you need a foreign language for your degree. You take that CLEP test and you can test out of that Spanish requirement. And then that's 5 credits that you don't have to pay for. So you're saving yourself some money. But if none of those options work, Melissa will tell you some other options that you might have.
Awesome. Yeah, so some other options to think about is looking at different college options, which is one of the reasons why we encourage you all to have your students apply for more than just one college, having them apply for a lot of different options, private, public, 2-year, 4-year, so that they can kind of be able to compare, have different offers to compare and figure out the best choice for them. So looking at other offer letters and seeing if there's a more affordable option, like doing your, gen ed credits at a 2-year college and then doing transfer, right? So that transfer opportunity can also have a lot of scholarship options that go with it as well. And that's another thing to think about too, is that, especially in King County, at least, King County and Seattle, the King County Promise and Seattle Promise, obviously it's a lot more affordable for students that qualify for that to be able to go to community college and then transfer to a 4-year college if that's what they want to do. And there's a lot of scholarships that come with that. And one of the websites that Carrie put in the chat, the washboard.org, that's through Washington State, through the Student Achievement Council, which is basically their college access kind of department. And it's a really great website. It basically allows you spend a lot of time putting in your profile, and then it's going to find scholarships that you should apply for. So it helps basically bring scholarships options to you. And if you're a transfer student, there are transfer scholarships that you can apply for as well. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about special circumstances appeal. And I want to start by breaking down the terms first. So this year, this is the first year that they had special circumstances kind of built in, like a built-in option in the FAFSA. And so basically, if you chose that option on your FAFSA or you didn't, but you decide that you have a special circumstance once you get your offer letter and you want to appeal, basically what happens is that you gather up different documentation to support your appeal of why you're appealing. And then that gets sent to your financial aid office. And the financial aid official then has to look over your case and make what's called a professional judgment review. And so these two terms, professional judgment review and special circumstances appeal, are a part of the same process, basically. It's all a part of trying to have a change in the aid that was awarded or in your expenses. So that's the two different kinds here, is income related or expenses related. If you need to get your, say in our examples, we had the student aid index at 0, meaning that the family was expected to contribute $0 to the college education. But say in your FAFSA or WASFA, you have an SAI of, a few thousand, or basically something that's not doable for your family, then your goal would be to get your SAI reduced to be lower, right? Saying that we actually can't afford to pay that much for college. And so we need more. We have there's more need-based aid that we are needing to get from the college. So in that case, it may be a change in employment that happened, or a circumstance that you feel like you weren't able to show or explain on the FAFSA. And that's something that you would need to appeal directly to each financial aid office that you're looking to get your the offer letter adjusted or changed. And then the second one is the expenses related appeal, and this is when you're looking to get your cost of attendance increased. So we have the cost of attendance that includes both direct and indirect, basically everything it's going to cost for your student to go to college, right? And you're appealing saying this was not accurate. Our cost of attendance is actually higher than what you said, meaning they left something out or they didn't consider a certain piece of it. Okay, so those are the two different circumstances, special circumstances appeal. And then on the next slide, we have a great website that can help with the special circumstances appeals. And I will also add that we have a separate presentation or a separate webinar all about special circumstances, because it is can be a pretty complex and specific topic, right? So there is a webinar and slides dedicated specifically to special circumstances appeal. And so if you feel like that's a situation that you're in, it'd be worth checking that out to get more detailed explanation and walkthrough. But this website right here is a great resource if you're in the special circumstances appeal process. It basically helps you to get together, paperwork, figure out who needs to help you with, who you need to get letters from, and all that kind of stuff to put it all together. And so it's a great website to use, formswift.com, and it can be really helpful in the special circumstances appeal situation. And then these websites that we're sharing on this slide are really helpful to compare offer letters. And each site has like a different thing that it can be helpful for. For example, the third one, the College Navigator website, that can help you look at cost of attendance, graduation rates, average financial aid received. So it might be helpful to look at that even now before you get an offer letter, right? Because it can help you compare different colleges to kind of know what to expect before you get your award letters. So each of these are different. We have the student loan repayment calculator, right? So we have different purposes for each of these, and it can help you just compare and kind of figure out some options in terms of your award letter and your financial aid options. And then the last, this other resource that we wanted to share is the Financial Aid Hub, which I mentioned earlier in the presentation. So the College Success Foundation Financial Aid Hub, it is a really great resource for educators, but also for families and for students. And a lot of times on the website, on the hub, you'll see options like the webinar and PowerPoints for students or for families or students, or for like staff, educators, practitioners. So you want to look for the in your case, you'd want to look for the webinars and handouts and PowerPoints that say students or families on them. There's all sorts of topics related to financial aid. This is a website that I use on a daily basis that I'm always pointing my educators to that I work with. They have really comprehensive information about financial aid, about FAFSA, WASFA, about FSAID, about special circumstance, like I mentioned. They even have guides that are both in English and Spanish. A lot of great handouts on there. So definitely a website to check out and to keep in mind if you do have questions that come up. It's a great piece to check out. Okay, I know we already had some great questions going on that Carrie and others were answering. So I want to just kind of check out where we are on that. Carrie and Cresselia, do we have questions that we would want to answer verbally or anything like that?
Yeah, so let's go through everything and we can answer a few verbally. One question that we had was, will an award letter have your scholarship on there? So if you applied for a scholarship and you are awarded the scholarship, then yes, it will be on your award letter. Let's say you applied for a scholarship and you thought you got it, but you don't see it on your award letter. I want you to check in with your financial aid office. I want you to check in with your scholarship provider, because sometimes people think that they were awarded something and they weren't. And maybe they forgot to click submit. So they never actually submitted the scholarship. We have that happen quite a bit.
Yeah.
So I want you to check in with both offices to see what's going on.
It typically
And
won't include like scholarships that are available that students can apply for, and that's typically like a different like a website on most college websites. So if you're wondering about scholarships from that school, you'd want to go onto the website and literally on their search page in that college's website, search for scholarships, and usually they'll have resources around scholarships and information about scholarships for that college in for itself. So that's another piece to think about as well. It won't necessarily be on the award letter. I don't feel like I've ever seen that before.
I
Yeah.
haven't seen it before. Another question that we got is, if a student decides to take their prereqs at a community college and then transfer, would that reduce their financial aid? I haven't seen it reduce someone's financial aid. So if you take your prereqs and then you go, and let's say you do your full 2 years of prereqs, instead of being a freshman, then you'd be a junior. Um, I want to say that every school is different, right? Some universities might give more aid to a freshman than they would a junior, so you want to check in with the school. But in regards to your grant aid and your loans that are available, it won't impact it negatively. It's income based for grants. Let's see, what's the best way to contact the college's financial aid office? I'm sorry I didn't um, get to that one in the chat. So when you go to your school's website, in the search bar, you can put in financial aid, because sometimes they're little hover buttons when you're like hovering over students to see how to get to the financial aid website. It's not that like that user friendly. You can just type in financial aid into the search bar and their webpage will come up. But um, a lot of financial aid offices, it's hard to get a hold of them by phone. So I'd recommend sending them an email and then following up with a phone call. And then there's also an automatic email that a lot of financial aid offices are giving you that'll say, hey, due to the high number of calls and emails, it'll take us about 3 to 5 business days to get back to you. But I always recommend a paper trail. So send them an email and follow up with a phone call if possible.
Yeah, I totally agreed. Every single way you can contact them, contact them.
Mhm.
I've actually seen some colleges that now have like a little like live chat option on their website too, which can be really handy. So definitely check out the website to see if they have a little live chat in the corner. But if not, definitely sending an email and calling, and trying like different times of day, right? So trying one day early in the morning, or trying one day, near closing when they close or something. So definitely trying different times of day as well if you're having trouble getting a hold of them by phone. Um, but definitely sending an email as well. So doing both.
Mhm. Another question that we had is, what's the percentage of students that get more aid from submitting an appeal? As long as they will give you an actual appeal form that has exactly what to turn in. So follow their directions and it'll be approved. There are some students who think that because they pay $100 a month in rent that they should qualify for more financial aid. I can tell you now that's not going to get you more financial aid. It would have to be like a more substantial amount. Um, so let's say when you originally filled out your FAFSA, you were living at home and now you're living on campus, and you can provide the proof that now you're living on campus and you fill out that appeal form, your cost of attendance will then go up substantially and you can get more loans if you want loans. But as long as you follow what they ask you for, 95% of the time it's going to be approved. It's just, yeah, there have been some students that just think that because they paid maybe a little bit extra money every month that they should qualify for more financial aid. And unfortunately, the federal government doesn't see it that way. So, let's see.
We had another question. If a student is accepted to a university as a freshman but decides to go to a community college for the prerequisites, do they have to reapply to the university to transfer there later?
You would. Typically, with a university, they would keep you, like, if you would have a certain amount of time to say yes or no, I'm going to that school. And then you would let them know, no, I'm going to go to Everett Community College for the next year. And then you'd reapply. And then you'd probably want to see your transcripts from the college that you're currently going to.
Sometimes it can make it a stronger case, to be honest.
Mhm.
It's not a positive or a negative necessarily, right? It's still kind of neutral when you apply, but it does allow them to see, okay, well, they did some college courses already, how they've been doing, right? So if your student really excelled at community college, that can actually work well in their favor. I know some students who like high school was not their thing, and so they had like a lower GPA and ended up going to community college first and did really well there, just depending on the classes they took that were kind of more hands-on. And then they were able to transfer, and it looked, they actually excelled in college. So it doesn't really affect it. You do have to reapply, but it can be a positive. And like I said, there are scholarships for transfer students. So that's also another option that would kind of kick in if your student decides to transfer later.
Mhm. And sometimes it's also easier to get into, say, the big colleges like UW. I know that it was easier for students to transfer in after having 45 credits of prereqs than having it be so competitive as a freshman and having so many denial letters go out. It's a lot easier to transfer in later on.
It can also just be helpful if you have a student that doesn't quite know what they want to focus on. A lot of times when you're going to a four-year college, they want you to figure it out like pretty quick when you get there. Versus a
Mhm.
community college, you can take a variety of courses and the student can really explore and see what they're interested in. And then by the time they transfer, they know exactly what they want to focus on. So that's also something to keep in mind depending on where your student is at. Um, yeah, and I also want to point out, Carrie put in the chat the email for the scholarship services. If you have questions that, have specific private information or just don't feel comfortable asking on the chat here, you can always reach out and email the scholarship services team, Carrie and Cresselia and Maria. They have awesome information and will get back to you and help you with your questions. So that's also an option too, and definitely, hold on to that email for if questions come up later on, okay? Any other questions that are coming up for you all that you'd want to ask in the chat?
Let's give it like a minute or two. If you don't
Yeah,
have questions, feel free to log off.
yeah,
But if you do, we'll hang out for a couple more minutes.
yeah. Thank you all for coming tonight. Appreciate your taking your time in the evening. Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. Good luck.